to our discussion. Today, as always, we have our awesome co-host Hank. How are you doing, Hank?
I am Leland. I'm blessed, and for a lot of people to hear people say, "Well, I'm blessed," they think it's a trite statement. But I
Hmm.
think you know my struggle, you know my journey, you know my story, and I'm just blessed that I have the ability to assimilate, to understand, and hopefully articulate some things that we're going to be dealing with today.
Whew. Amen to that. I'm excited too, Hank. You just supercharged me, so I'm feeling strong.
Well, I think that someone said that iron sharpens iron. I'm gonna say diamond sharpens diamond.
Oh yes, sir.
Why did I go there? What's the hardest? What's the hardest? What's the hardest object?
A diamond.
Thank you so much.
I, don't- I,
And
don't- I don't know one better.
we've been forged by pressure and by heat.
There you go. Pressure bursts pipes or makes diamonds.
Hush now.
So
I
with
like
that
that.
being said, there's a lot of pressure going on right now in the economy, and it's pretty interesting. So
Hmm.
I would not want to be working for the Federal Reserve as of today because they're expected to make some big statements,
Hmm.
and we're all expecting them to raise rates. So why might that be an issue, Hank?
Let's let me digress for a moment, Leland, because I think it's important. I said before that we get a headline, and depending on which rabbit tail trail we're running, we grab something and we run with it, not really sitting back and trying to widen the apertures of our vision. The Federal Reserve has a responsibility to try to ensure that the economy is working properly. And you got some of the smartest people in the country who are there pulling strings, and they're evaluating and looking at everything. But the Federal Reserve can't do things by themselves if the rest of the commercialized um, world, for lack of a better term, here in the country, if the companies, if the owners of companies, if the operators of companies, if they're not participating, if they're not willing to ensure that they're not doing price gouging, that they're not doing hoarding, that they're not doing all of these sleights of hands, okay, it might make the job of the Federal Reserve easier. Now,
Oh,
all
okay.
right, now, I think you will agree, and people who listen will agree, that there are ebbs and flows in the economy all the time. There are causes and effects. There are hiccups. There are people who make projections or calculations that that may not go correctly because of things like pandemic or invasion or I don't know, drought,
Uh huh.
hurricanes, tornadoes. There are things outside at the time these decisions are made, outside the purview of the forecasters. So they're
Okay.
making these predictions under somewhat generic, pristine circumstances. They might consider some what ifs, but when they were sitting at the table a month ago, 2 months ago, they weren't thinking of Ukraine. 3 years
No.
ago, they weren't looking at a pandemic. 8 months ago, they weren't looking at fires in California and Washington and Oregon. They're not looking at a drought on the West Coast right as it stands right now. So,
Right.
and you said it. I mean, people that work at the Federal Reserve or the U.S. Treasury have their hands full. And aside from trying to ensure that we got food on the table and gas in our cars or what have you, you got boneheads constantly criticizing what it is that they're trying to get done because they want to score political points.
That's right. Speaking of, just I don't know if I shared this with you or not, Hank, but
Hmm.
my senior year of college. um, a recruiter for the Federal Reserve. He said, "Hey, why don't you just come work with us?" I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, what type of retirement plan do you guys have?" In my mind, unfortunately, as someone who who studied economics and was about to graduate college,
Hmm.
I was under the assumption that the Federal Reserve was a government institution, and I said,
Private.
"Hey,
Hmm.
I said, hey, what type of retirement plan do you guys have?" And the recruiter looked at me,
Hmm.
and I'm like, hey, let me know. He said, "Well, we have a 401k." I was like, "Okay, well, you guys have any pensions?" He said, "No, no, no." I said, "Why not?" He said, "We're a private company."
Say that again and say it loudly. The Federal Reserve is a what?
The Federal Reserve is a private company.
Is it affiliated at all with the federal government?
No, not
No,
truly. It's not.
no.
And I had no idea. That blew my
Most
mind.
people don't. Most people don't. It's sort of like a think tank. It's a group of smart folk who are making decisions for our well-being on a daily basis because we went off the gold standard some years ago.
Yep. And so he was like, no, he's like, actually, I think he says like 12 or 16
Mhm,
federal uh, reserve banks within the United States. And he said, actually, you would be
mhm,
employed by one of those banks. Each bank is different as far as their onboarding and
mhm,
but you will be employed by one
mhm.
of those banks, and everything that we do has to be confidential. And I said, oh, I said, okay. I said, so as a college student getting ready to graduate, looking at different offers, right?
Mhm.
I thought to myself, man, the retirement plan here is going to suck.
Mhm. Well, Leland, in something else, and people may not know, is that the people who sit on the board of the Federal Reserve are the heads of the big private banks in the United States.
Absolutely, they all come together. How
They
about
all
that?
they all come together. So in that we're talking about recession because I think that's important because people throw words out somewhat um, innocently.
Yeah,
Between 2000 and I might get my dates wrong. People don't hold me to dates, but I want you to hold me to fact. Somewhere between 2007 and probably 2014, the Federal Reserve implemented something called QE1. It was quantitative easing to help to stem the tide of of recession created by the crazy housing bubble. And what it did, and nobody complained that the Federal Reserve stepped in to save us.
especially real estate investors who were being so many who were choosing to be so greedy and basically killing the market.
Now, what the point I want, what another point I want to make is that those big banks were able to get money ultimately at zero prime rate.
That's right.
Now, hang on. These banks who were making money hand over fist that were part and parcel a part of the housing bubble were now getting money for free.
That's kind of ironic.
But 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 again it's true and nobody said a word.
Not a mumbling word.
Nobody said a word, okay? So I applaud the Federal Reserve. I don't care who they own work for. I applaud them working for the most part hand in glove with the US Treasury Department because the Treasury Department is federal government. And they're in constant communications as to this best strategy to keep the boat in the water and on the water rather than in the water underwater.
What's interesting is, of course, there are tons of books like the Creature of Jekyll Island, and many people are against quote unquote the Federal Reserve. Okay,
Mhm.
and I get it. I understand. Say paying taxes is inhumane, um, different things like that. But I also want to
Mhm.
say this. What's very interesting too is If someone chooses to invest and own alternative assets, you pay less or zero taxes. It's pretty interesting,
Depending on the vehicle you use.
depending on the vehicle that you use.
That's right.
So
Absolutely.
that would mean that you are given advantages
Hmm.
by using certain vehicles, and that you're also basically penalized, aka taxed, for
Hmm.
using the wrong type of vehicles. What's also interesting
Hmm.
is the chairman's or the advisors for the board for the Federal Reserve are also advisors for various banking institutions.
Hmm.
Those banking
Yes.
those banking institutions own alternative investments.
And traditional.
Yes, absolutely. Many of those same banks
Hmm.
purchase into companies before they IPO.
Help people understand what IPO means, sir.
An IPO is an acronym that stands for initial public offering. It is
Ah.
when someone takes an existing quote unquote small business, because by that time it's considered a small business, okay,
Hmm.
by
Hmm.
definition. They take that small business to one of many banking or investment banks to get a valuation. These
Hmm.
investment banks all make their own individual quote unquote third party evaluation of that company, their company's performance, the financials, their assets. They give that
Hmm.
company a value. They then take those reports to NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange or whoever their underwriters are for that particular stock.
Amazing. Hmm.
And that is where the value comes from for them to place that company on the stock exchange or on the market, quote
On the
unquote.
market. Hmm.
And that is the process for an initial public offering.
Now, thank you, Leland. Now, you're a pretty smart guy, and that's why I like you. People and this is a math quiz for folk out there. Um, Within about a year ago, say if we were looking at a graph and zero, okay, the axis zero was the state of the economy 2 years ago. Over 2 years, the economy started to bubble up, and hiccup, and the inflation rate got to 6%, cause and effect, right?
Right?
Now, what we're saying is that there's going to be a recession because the Treasury Department is going to have some iterative increases in the interest rates, and those increases might be, no matter how many it is going to be a 2% increase in the interest rate. And folk are calling that a recession. Now, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I think I'm pretty decent. Six, I mean, two from six still leaves four,
Correct.
which means that we are doing a lot better at 4% interest or inflation. Okay. So we have to sit back and say, well, with the feds increasing the interest rates on goods and services or what have you, is it having, if it's, is it truly having dire consequences on Main Street?
Whew.
Because the the farmers are able, and maybe not the farmers, it's the people who are buying the goods from the farmers or jacking up the price, and they're saying it's because of the price of oil. They're jacking up the price because they said it's COVID. They're jacking up the price because they said it was a hurricane or a tornado or what have you. Okay, it's not, the farmer is still getting 2 cents a bushel,
Right?
and he or she is just hoping that they can get more bushels per acre. Okay, and that's their rate of inflation.
Correct.
So we have to be careful when we start to pin donkeys, tails on donkeys, and trying to pin them on the Federal Reserve and on the Treasury or the federal government. I think that we need to start holding the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the members of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce accountable for some of the actions, inactions, or some of the mismanagement or misinformation that causes you and me to have palpitations.
So let me summarize what Hank just said for some of you guys.
Help me, please.
We live in a capitalist society, and much of this capitalist society is driven by media and marketing. And many individuals look for opportunities to find an excuse to maximize profit.
Oh
In
my
other
lord.
words, if they hear someone saying, "Hey, there's a storm off the Gulf of Mexico," although that storm may not even disrupt any oil production, they will choose to increase the prices for oil.
Interesting that you said oil because last week everybody was concerned. It's over $100 a barrel. Okay.
Yep.
Price of oil dropped $6 last week for no apparent reason whatsoever. Even though we've turned the spigot off with Russia.
Ethics. People caught on. People caught on to the fact that them taking advantage of the situation had
Hmm.
nothing to do with Russia. Just like in the example, a storm off the Gulf of Mexico doesn't disrupt any production, but yet through the media or marketing, they'll say, "Oh, we have to raise prices because this might impact our working force."
Leland, sometimes I've been accused of being a smart A. If you don't own a vehicle, do you give a rat about the price of gas?
No,
Okay, all right. I just thought that. Okay.
no.
Now those who would say, "Well, why
But
would he? Why
but
would he ask that question?"
but allow me to put it this way. Let's say
Okay.
Bob does not own a vehicle. He doesn't care about the price of oil or price of gas, oil, whatever.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Uh-huh.
However, he happens to order things from Amazon frequently. And so Amazon
Oh.
says to him, or Uber Eats, whatever, says to that person, "Hey, listen, because of gas prices raising up, we're going to
Mhm.
have to charge you more money for Amazon Prime this year. And it's going to be another $5 increase and blah, blah, blah." Well, did that really cost Amazon more money? No, not
Mm-mm.
really. But it was just an excuse for them to raise the price. Because again, what many people don't know is that Amazon actually pays subcontractors a lot of times to pick up and drop off their packages. So the subcontractors are paying the gas, not Amazon.
Mhm. And then the airlines they'll hit you with a surcharge,
Yes,
increase the price of the ticket. In anyway, it's the point we I think little in the bottom line is understand what inflation really is and how it impacts you. Understand how recession may or may not impact you, and act accordingly.
act accordingly. Now, going on to our for our final segment for today.
I don't know
uh,
whether I'm ready.
just yesterday, I don't. And maybe it was Monday. Monday, Hank said, "Listen, be careful who you align with. Right? Be careful. Be careful of your
Hmm.
choices."
Hmm.
Um, as many people may or may not know, Russia has a deal that is due today. They have a payment that's due today
Yep,
of
today is Wednesday. Hmm.
$217 million.
Yep.
Interest only payments, euro bonds. Now, keep in mind one more time, those are alternative investments. So that means that countries, yes, countries, and astute companies invest in alternative investments. Therefore, you as an individual should do the same. But
Hmm.
nonetheless, with that being said, Hank, what exactly is this telling us in reference to Russia?
It's well, I think I need to rewind for something. There's something called the International Monetary Fund, and there are some big cats on Wall Street whose currency is exchanged constantly. one for the other without a problem. A lot of countries, their currency is not part of the International Monetary Fund, so they must buy dollars, sterlings, yen, yuan, or euros in their currency to transact business on the global stage.
Mm.
Okay? So the situation is, and China's on that is part of that. They get certain special dispensations for being part. Because we've been the U.S. is putting lots of sanctions on Russia. The Russian ruble is worth zero. So Russia wasn't exchanging rubles on the international stage. It was using rubles to buy something else, to transact in dollars. Because if whomever it is that you're dealing with, if they only accept dollars, no matter what it is that you're buying or selling, you got to transact your business in the dollar, not in anything else. So now it's time for Russia to pay its bills, but particularly no one in the EU, is going to participate with Russia because of sanctions. For the last couple of weeks, China has been trying to straddle the fence and be on the sidelines because if you remember during the Olympics, there was a lot of publicity about the president of China and the president of Russia, whatever their titles are, sitting together and making some type of agreement. Well, guess what, folks? Now it's fish or cut bait time. Okay? And I have been saying all along, choose, it's time to choose wisely. Now, according to the news, China has been trying to say, well, no, I'm not really supporting them, but they're not supporting NATO in the EU. So my grandfather used to use the terminology again. Now, people say, well, why would people of yesteryear, they couldn't speak properly? Well, my grandfather, my great grandfather, were precluded from speaking the king's English. So again, for them was called against. Okay? We all right? So now it's time, and China is now, if it goes along with Russia, is showing that it has sided with Russia. Now, I understand, Leland, I will go to bat for you any day in the week. But I got news for you. If you do something illegal, I'll come visit you. But I'm not
But you won't
okay.
share the skill, right?
I'm not going to participate in that legal activity with you. Okay.
That's right. Oh my gosh.
Okay. So I'm saying you can be friends. You can create alliances with everybody you want to create alliances with. But at some point in time, you remember we talk about the humanistic aspects of some of the stuff that we're talking about? Where is your moral fiber? Where is your
Yeah,
ethical fiber?
yeah.
Okay. So, and I said yesterday, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. China is, I won't call him enemy, that's a strong term, but China is not a friend, China is an adversary.
Oh, well.
Russia is not a friend, Russia is an adversary. North Korea is not a friend, North Korea is an adversary. Argentina is changing its stripes a little bit. So you've got Russia, China, North Korea at a minimum that are somewhat bosom buddies. And so, because of the woes of Russia, these other guys may end up suffering because if the phone rings at 3 o'clock, if their red phone rings at 3 o'clock in the morning, you've heard that expression, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. If that phone rings at 3 o'clock in the morning, okay, that is the real time for folk to choose sides because you can no longer stand on the line because you will be impacted by a global war. Period. And we're just trying to keep that from happening by saying, please, Russia, come to your senses. don't be as cruel as you're cruel as you're being. Why, in essence, why are you being so cruel? Can't we just sit down and have a conversation? Because if China doesn't help Russia, Russia will default on its debts, and everybody that Russia owes will suffer negatively. However, that may not be all bad.
We will see. Well, as of right now, looks like Russia will be paying its debt thanks to a $5 loan from its buddy.
Really? Okay. And and Leland, and I understand the philosophy, the concept, the idea, the expression. Don't kick a man when he's down, or don't back a dog. I understand all of that. But if someone has done something to cause them to be put in a corner or to be down, sometimes you have to help them to stay down.
Whew. I want to say something real quick, just
Please
'cause I'm
do.
not sure that the listeners caught on to. Russia has to do multiple exchanges, right? Because of their currency being so, it's worth little now, right? Or less. It's worth less now. It's worth less than what it was worth months ago. Um, and I believe part of that exchange has to deal with digital currency.
Yes.
I think it would be naive for anyone to think that they're not taking the ruble and finding a way to maybe exchange it with lesser valued digital currency, like, I don't know, Ripple or something like that, something that's worth, you know, 10 cents or a cent, and then slowly beginning to divvy it up with larger currencies or Bitcoins, um, with digital currencies, and then exchanging it for um, other currencies, other
Hmm.
global currencies.
Okay.
I am pretty certain of that. I've been talking about that for, I don't know, at least a month or so.
Hmm.
Um, and so I would not be surprised if that's the case. And I want to give a warning out to all of my fellow crypto investors that if or when the IMF, the UN, or even the United States government looks into those interactions or exchanges with cryptocurrency in Russia, or cryptocurrency in the ruble in some form, that they may begin to seize or freeze certain exchanges. Keep in mind that one of the largest digital currency or cryptocurrency exchanges is Coinbase. Coinbase is now a publicly traded company that reports directly to the SEC.
And in that it does report, the U.S. Department of Justice has just brought on a hired gun to go searching for some of the wealth of Russian oligarchs. And as they are trying to find that common thread with the oligarchs, what might it do with the country of Russia as a result of that? They're going to be able to discern, discover, and it's not just the U.S. looking; it's the EU and other favorite nations are all looking because they are participating in this sanctioning
Yep,
of the Russian financial system.
yep. So do your research, be alert, be aware. Um, Yeah, I mean, that's really it. With with us exiting real quick, want to remind you all of March 23rd at 7 p.m. We're having a multifamily investing live training. You don't want to miss it. Make sure to bring any questions that you have. This will be held via Zoom. It's a free, excuse me, a free, not a flea. It's a free live training, March 23rd at 7 p.m. And Hank, any closing words you want to add?
I would just like to say how much we appreciate people who are listening and following us online. We don't take any of this um, lightly, and what you get is our absolute best. And I think you realize that to this point, there are no stones unturned. But if you go out and you do your research, I think you'll realize that we are pretty darn close to being spot on in our evaluation and assessment of issues. And that's not being braggadocious. It's just saying we want to make certain that we're bringing content to you that is meaningful, that you can rely on, depend on, and not trust us. We're saying do your own. We just keep pulling back layers of this onion to say, hey, ultimately, you're going to need to invest in alternative investments. Do your homework on the front end, and there are lots of investments that you need to deal with. And if alternatives are that good, and they are, or if you don't think they're that good, why would the mega millionaires or billionaires or the big hedge funds or the large banks invest in alternatives? You should too.
Absolutely.